When I was building my setup for going out with the Eagles to begin with, there were a lot of little fiddly things that I was thinking I wanted to do. And when I say fiddly, I mean just like tweaky details. I wanted to cover everything possible. And that meant I was thinking, okay, I want good sustains, but I might want something that's got a little built-in swell in it. And then I might want to have some shorts, just some staccatos and spiccatos and stuff, and I might want some pizzicato and blah, blah, blah. And I made this huge list of things that I wanted. And then I realized that most of that in the live setting was not necessary. And it was actually very liberating, because the truth is, you really want to reach for those things only if it's very, very specific. There are many sounds that you might use, many libraries or synths or whatever that have string sounds in them that will do a perfectly acceptable short, staccato or spiccato, just by playing it short, so you don't have to change articulations. Sometimes there'll be a stunt where you really do want that short sound. I was just thinking of that Madonna track, Die Another Day. I have no idea why that came into my head, but here it is. And so it's full of shorts, and you would want shorts for that because it's featured. It's a big deal. I feel like playing that with a sound that's long and just like, I don't know, that would just sound synthy and, kind of like I didn't really want to get out of bed for it. I'm not about that. Be sure that you don't try to do way too much. Have your specific sounds for things. If a song calls for a really heavy, epic string section, then find some strings that you like for the texture, for the, the sound of the vibrato and the bowing, and then add, a fat, warm, dull synth underneath it and for width, and then you'll have this massive sound. On the Eagles thing, I built my rig using 8DO sounds. It was something that was very wide and fat and broad, and I found in rehearsals that it was just too slow. It didn't respond the way I wanted it to, and I wound up using a VSL, Vienna Instruments bit of orchestra that it was very dry and very specific, and that was really cool. And then I put a little bit of synth underneath it, and that took care of it. I mostly just used that for sustains. I didn't have a lot of shorts and stuff, but if I were going to just bring something out right now, I would start with a reasonably dry library, just one that doesn't have a lot of baked-in room, because often stuff that sounds great in your studio is just not going to sound good through a PA. It's not. It's not sharp enough. It doesn't do the things you need to do enough. I'd probably start with something that sounded a little detailed, maybe something like VSL Synchron Chambers strings, just as a basis, and then fatten that with things. If I wanted to do shorts, just the shorts that you like that sound right for the thing. I mean, it's nice to have pizzicato in your pocket if anything in the set list calls for it, but it's not something that you're always going to want to pull out. It's good to have a set of muted strings. If you don't, then just make a patch with your existing stuff that you filter a bit just to sort of simulate the muted strings effect, because if what you really need is a big warm background, you just don't want all this rosin interfering with other high-end stuff. And a lot of building sounds for a show has to do with, in some ways, and you have to be careful about it, but in some ways anticipating the needs of the front of house mixer. You don't want to give them things that are so complex that they just pull you down and pull you down. They can't really get a good balance, or they EQ it in a way that doesn't sound right to you, but that's what you have to live with. You don't want to do that. You want to just give them something that's extremely serviceable, that does exactly what it's supposed to do. I'm struck by the fact that a lot of these Roland keyboards, and I'll just name check them, but a lot of Roland keyboards, the Phantom X, I used it a lot, and the sounds just work in a live mix. They are made to do that. They're big enough, fat enough. You can get brightness out of them if you want to, but you don't have to. And most of the string stuff that you hear played live is something that's like that. It's, you play that with a pedal or whatever dynamic controller you use. Could be a pedal, could be if you're playing one-handed stuff, I guess you could use mod wheel or using a breath controller, which is my preferred thing, that and the pedal. in keeping with the idea that things might sound better in the studio than they do live, it's also important to remember not to put too much bottom end in things like strings, because it's only rarely that that's appropriate. Most of the time, they're doing some background sort of thickness management rather than providing the low end for the song. So just take care with the amount of low end that you're sending out, how much of the basses and cellos are really pushing air. If the front of house mixer and the artist decide at some point there doesn't need to be very much of your live part heard out in the room or at all, you still need to play your parts, not just pedal down, not just sit there. And there are two reasons for this. One is you are part of the show. And if you're up there just sitting there, you are not helping the show. Your job is to help the show. So let's say you're not playing, and then the artist and front of house have this conversation that they don't include you in, where the artist says, hey, I'd really like to hear more of that string part. And they don't say anything to you about it, but you just go and do the show. And then the next day, the front of house is like, where was your part? I was reaching for the fader. Nothing was happening. You don't want that to happen. You need to do your gig. Even if no one hears it, you have to do it with the same level of quality and intensity, because that is your job. That's it. Do your thing. It doesn't matter how much of it or how little of it is used. It's your job. Do your thing.